Hey YouTube, this topic is going to seem super random if you're someone who subscribes to my channel, but it's actually something that I've been wanting to talk about for ages, since I had a blog and I was doing more written content. And that is some tips for moving into your first apartment. Because I remember that like maybe a year after I moved into my first apartment, I started thinking, wow, I wish someone had told me these things. You know, what to look for, what to worry about, what to notice. And so this is going to be probably one in a series of videos. I don't know if I'll give it a name, but a series of videos about kind of life tips for starting out. I know there's been a rash of videos about adulting and stuff like that, you know, on the interwebs since I had this idea, so there may be 9 million other videos like it, but here is my take. For context, I am 34. I have been getting my own places outside of like dorm rooms for 12 years, and I have lived in like 5 or 6 places, both with roommates and alone, and in big cities and small cities, never super rural. I grew up in a house, the same house, my whole growing up time, so I didn't really think much about what does one think of when they move. In fact, I thought moving sounded really exciting until I did it. And then, you know, I moved in, I attended college and lived in a dorm room for about 3.5 years, including some time abroad, with very few possessions and everything furnished. So, the first place I moved into was actually when I was in law school. I got an apartment in Iowa, and it was a decent apartment, but it definitely taught me some things. And then the next apartment, and then the next apartment. So here are some tips that I have come up with, that I think are things that are useful to ask about, to note, to do your pros and cons on, when you're looking for a place. First of all, just some general tips. So yeah, have a pros and cons list. I love spreadsheets. If you do subscribe to this channel, you know that I love spreadsheets. So I do think it's a great idea to have a spreadsheet of your requirements and your nice to haves, and then each apartment, along with some information about them, basic information like address, you know, if you're in like a big city, distance to the metro or subway, you know, bus lines, stuff like that, like other things that maybe aren't. So in addition to the specific requirements you want to check on for each place, so say like yes or no, or here's the details, there also might just be information like location that is general and you would like to know for each place. And a notes column for like general other features that maybe aren't important to you but are useful to note, like, oh, this building has a pool. I think is a really good idea. And that way you can also see where there are gaps, where you have to ask more questions, where you don't have information. Another general tip is to always come with, if you can type on your phone, that's fine. If you're a slow typer, a notebook and pen, and your phone or another form of camera, because it's a great idea when you go on apartment tours, if you can get a tour of a model or an existing apartment home to take pictures and ask questions about it. So, by the way, markets vary a lot. So for example, if you're in New York, you may have to go through a broker. It's a whole situation. It may be really hard to get a place. You probably want to have your checkbook with you in case you like a place so you can immediately put an offer on it. We're not going to talk so much about that kind of market specific stuff, but just some things you might not have thought of if you've never looked for an apartment before. So the first thing on my list is always just what is the heating and air conditioning situation. There's a lot of different kinds of heating and air conditioning. So I didn't know, when I moved into my first apartment, I didn't understand what radiator heat was. And Iowa gets really cold, and radiator heat it radiates, so it doesn't blow, basically. If you're used to vents that blow, there's no blowing, there's just radiators. In a really cold place like Iowa, in addition to the actual heat type, the windows are really important. So you can ask questions like, are these double glazed? What's the deal? Like, there are terms for these things. So taking a look at the windows, you know, you can, if you're in a really windy place, you can cover windows in the winter with this plastic sheeting stuff that you can get really easily at like a hardware store. You use a blow dryer, but it's still nice to have good windows. So related to that, the placement of the apartment unit will affect your heating and air costs. So what side of the building it's on, how high up it is, So for example, I had a garden apartment that was, it's a term for being kind of halfway underground, which does keep it a little bit warmer. But you might also have concerns about security. So if you are worried about security, you know, it's usually easier to access lower floors. But you can also look at, in addition to external security like the windows, you can look at things like, does your building have security cameras? Is there controlled access? Things like that. On the topic of security, also, you may want to know what the package situation is. Can you receive packages at your home? How does that work? If you can't, is there like an Amazon locker nearby? Is there a PO box, a post office nearby? You know, what are the options there? You may be interested in storage, particularly if you have like a bike or something. Where can you put the bike? So storage, parking. Find out about anything, whether it's your car, your bike, or just your stuff that you need outside of the apartment. Also for storage, take a look at all your closets, your pantry space. You may be kind of used to a particular storage situation, so keep in mind it's very different from place to place. Open up cabinets, see how deep they are, take a look at things. Oh, I should have said, along with the notebook, pen, and camera, measuring tape. Measure things, write down the measurements. Do ask the apartment manager when they're showing you around, is this unit the actual unit for rent or the exact same layout as a unit for rent? If not, what are the differences? So, are there differences in storage? Are there differences in the number of rooms, the size of the room? I mean, generally they will show you the same bed and bath, but like, is there maybe a model with a den? Does every model have a balcony? Are there models available on different floors? If you have a preference, you know, do you want a corner unit with more windows versus one that's not in the corner? Are there interior units with no windows? That would be a good thing to know. I don't know if they do that still, but and for accessibility, like what is the different distance from elevators and elevator and stair access? Because it might vary from unit to unit. So finding that out. Also ask them if the unit is different. Are the appliances the same? Are the fixtures the same? Any like what do they call it? Like finishes and things. So basically, if the apartment they're showing you has been remodeled really recently, has the apartment you're actually going to rent been remodeled this recently? And you may actually you may ask, is there a cheaper unit that hasn't been remodeled? I mean, that's up to you. I tend to like the ones that are more recently remodeled, but you know, your budget might you might prefer not. So that's a good thing, is try to find out about anything you find really important that is different in different apartments. So once you've looked at the AC and heat situation, the storage, I mean, the basic layout of the apartment, I didn't really mention because it seems a little more obvious, but you know, do measure to make sure your bed fits. So if you've got like a king size bed, you want to make sure that the bedroom will fit it. If you have any large furniture that you're particularly concerned about, mentally picture where you put it and measure. If you, what else about the room size? Like, do keep in mind that the size of windows will definitely affect your heating and cooling costs. So you can kind of tell from this light that I have a huge window in my room. We have them all around the apartment, and our utilities are atrociously expensive. So that is something to keep in mind. Measuring for furniture. Also, if you are going to have roommates, make sure you agree on who gets which bedroom. That's useful. You might also want to measure or look at the tub, because some apartments now will have like a garden tub or soaking tub. If that's something you're looking for, you can look for that by keyword. But if you want a really deep tub that you fit in, or just looking at the shower fixtures, are they going to meet your needs? Outlets are something I really like to check. So just counting I'll write down like how many outlets are in each room. On average, are the outlets placed in good positions, especially in older places? Sometimes they're not. What are the appliances that are available? So these are usually listed anywhere, but you want to ask yourself, how important is it to have a washer dryer in the unit? How important is it to have a washer dryer in the building, whether it's paid or not? Do you need a dishwasher? If you don't use a dishwasher, do you need deep sinks? So things like that. Microwave, do you have a preference between gas and electric stoves? You know, all of these things are worth considering. I know in one apartment, I cannot believe I did this, but I looked through the whole apartment, liked the apartment, didn't actually ask about a washer dryer because I'd never been in a building that didn't have one. I just assumed there must be one somewhere. No. There was a laundromat down the street, and about every year it went out of business for 2 months, and then somebody else bought it. So I did laundry in the bathtub because I didn't have a car. So that is definitely something to think about. If you don't have a car, you probably want at least a building that has washer dryer. Other things to consider. So I have seen that there are buildings, I think this is pretty rare, but where the heat and air is not controlled in the apartment. So definitely want to check that out. Because that will make a huge difference. Do they have ceiling fans, or sometimes they have caps, like I have a cap right over my head, where you can install your own. Overhead lights. If you do have things like fixtures that you can install, you might want to ask, like, are there any rules about this, about installing? Of course, if you have pets, that's going to be probably pretty obvious to you, but, taking a note both of whether pets are allowed and is there a pet fee. And asking about fees in general, especially in nicer buildings, especially in big cities, there might be fees around cleaning, there might be fees, like the common spaces, there might be recycling fees, like other things like that. So just finding out, that's another thing to look into. What is a trash and recycling situation in the building? Other amenities, so I mentioned package service, like package holding is one amenity you might be looking for. Does the building have a gym? Does the building have some sort of a common space? Does the building have bathrooms outside the apartment? So if you are sharing and you only have one bathroom in an emergency, is there somewhere you could go pee? You wouldn't think about that, but it could be useful. I think a lot of the other things are probably pretty intuitive, like looking at counter space, looking at, space in general, but those are just some of the things I find useful to inquire about. And then, of course, location, thinking about distance to things you care about, can make a huge difference, especially if you don't drive. And so I have definitely taken places that were not quite as much what I wanted in terms of amenities because of their location. So when you think about the cost of a place, I recommend in your little spreadsheet where you have your, requirements, does it have this, does it have that, to also include, in addition to the rent, include information about what the actual cost will be per year and over time. So you can find out from the manager, do they offer 2-year leases? Some jurisdictions, they're required to offer 2-year leases, because there won't be an increase for 2 years. So that's something worth looking at. You can ask, they may or may not tell you what the average increase has been in the past. And then what's included, what's not included, and then try, if you can, get averages on like utilities, things like that. Add up your rent, your basic utilities like water, gas, electric, garbage fee, whatever applies to your building. Internet and cable TV if you want it. Parking fees, pet fees, any other weird fees that might come up. Any additional public transit fees based on how far away you are, things like that. Put them all together and then take that combined cost per year and then like an estimate over, say, 2 years or 5 years, however long you think you might be there, and then compare. Because it may be that some buildings actually, even though their stated rent price is more expensive, when you add it all up, it's lower. So, yeah, those are my tips. If you have any tips yourself for people who are just starting to look for their first apartment, please leave a comment below. If you are one of these people and you have questions about anything specific, or are wondering for more clarification on any of my tips, also leave a comment below. And feel free to like and subscribe. I will have some more sort of adulting or starting out in professional life, those kinds of videos probably in the future. So if you are interested, let me know what topic you would like to see next.